everybody, and welcome to ABL Down on the Farm, episode 33, the Larry Bird episode. Very excited to be back this week. We're going to talk all things prospecting, but particularly prospecting in the ABL, a 30-team dynasty league with 20 minor light league spots per team for a glorious 600 prospects. We'll talk all about that and more today. I'm very excited to have a first-time guest on the show and now the co-host of our Major League podcast with Tyler. And Cal is going to join the show today, the owner of the LA Angels. And so without further ado, welcome, Cal.
Thank you for having me. I'm pretty fired up. But yeah, a lot of economic downturn recently, so I've had to pick up a second podcast part-time. So I do thank you for taking me in. But no, I'm very fired up to be on the show, seen many an episode, and yeah, it's just good to be in the chair finally.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to have you. Long overdue, and I still want to have you and your dad on the show at least once.
Oh yeah,
we'll talk more about your partnering with him in the ACL league in a little bit. But super glad you're able to make it and take time away from your busy podcast life. How that is. So I snuck you in on the weekend. And before we delve into a lot of topics that I wanted to cover with you today, since this is your first time on the show, I always like to talk with first-time guests about their prospecting approach, maybe how it's evolved over time, and now you're kind of an ABL veteran, right? And you're applied presumably some things you learned not only to this league but also to the ACL league that you're in, which is also a 13 league. So maybe talk about like your journey in fantasy baseball when it comes to prospecting and where you are now versus maybe where you started.
Sure. Well, I mean, let's see. Starting, dad being part of it was huge, right? So I at least got some type of inkling what I was going to be having to do, what the type of commitment I was going to take. But the closest thing that I was doing before this was a 12-teamer. I was in a 12-teamer at the time. Oh, and also a 16-teamer dynasty that my dad runs. But we have 3 prospects in that 16-teamers. So it's really just go to MLB.com, whatever Jonathan Mayo says goes, and you call it a day. Anything like maybe I knew a couple top 200, 300 guys. Yep. It was nothing close to what ABL was, but I was absolutely ready for it. I was so excited too because I wanted an excuse to throw myself into baseball even more. And this was absolutely the way because I had all this knowledge of prospects I thought, and I wanted an excuse to use it. And then I get in and I'm like, all right, dude, you're way over your head right now. You're going to have to buckle down and do some digging here. So it has definitely been a process. I'd say my first year in ABL, I don't think I was utilizing the tools I had at my disposal correctly. I don't think my evaluation process it's not sophisticated in any way at all. Not to say it is now, but I think it's better than it was. At least there's been progress. It's been a building blocks. But no, it's been a fun journey. ABL has made me just buckle down and learn more about the game than I ever have. So for that, I'm grateful. It's been a lot of fun. But yeah, definitely trial and error for sure.
Yeah. So in terms of how you've tried and erred and then learned from it, and how maybe you said there's progression. Mm-hmm. What would you say is has been the biggest area of improvement for you, or better utilization of the tools available to you, whatever that is? How have you seen progress from your own perspective?
I would say number one, patience. That was even before I was in this league. Patience with any type of young talent was non-existent. But also, you also can't hang on to that dead weight for too long. There's a fine balance you have to take, because if you are just not, if you're gonna be stubborn enough to the point where, no, this guy, like for me, it was Brent Honeywell years ago. I was so obsessed with Brent Honeywell. I was like, I'm sure he's gonna be a hit. I swear. You got to learn to cut that dead weight when it's dead. Yeah. So that's something I've also had to adapt to. So it's also be patient with the guys that you still see something with. But if you're not seeing it, you need to move on, especially in ABL, because it's so fast. Guys will go get that new prospect that's out there, and you're gonna be behind because you're too busy waiting. So I guess there is a fine line that I've learned to try to toe between waiting on the guy and cutting dead weight.
Sure, sure. Are there any like sources that you've become more reliant on as you progress through this, or has it shifted in some way?
I would say reliance on Savant, not specifically for this is not really prospect based because they're just now getting MILB stuff. Utilization of like custom fan graph leaderboards, that's been pretty huge. But I think my first year, I pretty much relied on Fangraphs the board, which for some reason I thought Fangraph rankings was in any way like reasonable. Uh,
Right,
but I also deviating off of prospect lists has been a huge thing for me because I'm not an expert, so I always trusted the experts. But I have found that experts have their own biases, and I don't really adhere to them most of the time. So I have definitely gone and found certain little holes on Twitter to see if I can find any little edge somewhere. Any
right,
any prospect that like Zahir Hope was one of those guys, just like on some cavern in Twitter. I had my eye on. Granted, Rourke spent the extra dollar on me, so it didn't really work out anyways. I had to go get him through a trade. But those type of players, I've been able to at least do some digging. I don't think I would have done that when I first joined ABL. I don't think that would have been on my radar.
right, right. So diligence, digging, learning some patience,
Yes.
but not too much patience.
Yes, not too much.
um,
There, I said there's a fine line because
there's a line.
yeah,
There's a
you can't
line.
just be cutting bait immediately. First month into the season, but also let's call a spade here.
Yep, exactly right. And then it sounds like you've you know started to do some like real digging on your own in terms of just in terms of Twitter, looking at video, maybe like reading up on guys from different sources.
Mhm.
So this year, like in the handbook, for example, you jumped into the top 10 in terms of farm system rankings, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you got there and whether that surprised you at all. Like, whether you were surprised to see yourself in the top 10. Maybe it doesn't matter to you if you're in the top 10, but which is fine. But, I wasn't surprised to see your team up there. Because I think at the trade deadline last year, I mean, you had a dump proclamation and you cleaned out some of your major league talent and
Mhm.
revitalized your system. And I think I commented on the podcast at the time that I thought you had vastly improved your position through some of the trades you had made. And I just wanted to get your reaction, whether you were kind of surprised to see yourself in the top 10, and kind of what your mentality was going into the dump deadline in terms of what you were hoping to acquire, and did you feel like you got there?
Well, I guess I wouldn't say I'm not surprised because when you dump as many times as I have, you better at some point see something for it. So, no, I was not surprised. But I think one thing that did surprise me was I guess, my return on investment for the players that I was giving up. So I was giving up like a Seiya Suzuki and a Cutter Crawford, and I got back solid prospects. And for the same market that had Aaron Judge in it, I was pretty happy for what I was giving up to get what I got.
Yep.
So I think a large factor in it was luck, because I think there was probably a sweepstakes for Judge. And then once that ended, I think teams that were competing realized, okay, well, I still need somebody. I need to actually pay for it, and I happen to be the guy that was there, readily available for whatever they wanted to do. I was not interested really in tapping into their MLB rosters. Granted, they just wanted to move a guy off just to make room, fine, whatever. Um, but I was not too interested in like capable MLB talent, which I think a lot of teams say that they are. But generally, capable MLB talent, I wouldn't be trading for this guy in the first place if
Yep.
I wouldn't be giving up something to get something. So most teams are not going to give you that capable MLB player. So I'm like, just give me the specs, and I will make do with what I can. But yeah, I think luck was a large factor. I'm not going to act like I totally know what I'm doing. Granted, the prospects were intentional, but the
Yep.
timing was definitely luck based, and who approached me was luck based.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes it's better to be the second man in
Hmm.
on these trades. You mentioned the judge market because there's so much focus on that the people who ended up losing the game of musical chairs, they then become a little bit more desperate,
Yeah.
right? And I think you were able to leverage that and make some nice trades. And we'll talk about one of them in particular that I liked in a second. But before we get to that, I am very interested in hearing about what it's been like to be prospecting with your dad. So Don is the owner of the Red Sox in our league, but you guys share a team in
Hmm.
ACL,
Hmm.
which is again is another 30-team league, with the same number of prospects, and it was a startup league this year. So, you know, you're I'm sure there's some good things about it, and I'd like to hear about those things, what you've enjoyed about it. But I'm also sure there's some challenging things about it because you guys are competing in ABL
Hmm.
on separate teams, and so you're sharing intel in a draft, both at the major league level, but also at the prospect level in a startup draft, and where you really can, evaluate or value anybody on the board, right? Because they're all
Yeah,
available, right?
exactly.
So maybe we'll start with the good stuff. What has been fun about it and kind of rewarding about it to be prospecting with your dad?
Honestly, it's just it's fun to talk ball with him, you know. So getting that I guess that excuse to go real deep on prospects, and I think I've always been way more interested in prospects than he has been. So to actually like have a reason for him to listen to me blabber on about prospects is pretty fun, you know. It's
Yeah.
like there's actually something in it for him now. So that was absolutely enjoyable, and I think he definitely enjoyed the process too of doing it with me. It's just at least having someone who is philosophically similar when it comes to prospecting in a way. I think with pitchers we're similar. I think
Uh-huh.
hitters we probably vary, but when it comes to how we evaluate pitching, I think we're pretty much in lockstep on what we like. So that made it a breeze. But there was also problems with that in ABL when he took one of the guys in the fifth round, which again, it's hard to steal anyone in the fifth round. But I was still a little bit peeved that he intentionally he knew that I was locked in on him, and 2 picks in front of me takes him. So that there was
Now,
definitely some hijinks.
we'll get into that in a second. So
Yeah,
I'm interested to hear what it is that you both mutually like in terms of pitching prospects, like what
sure.
excites you. Yeah.
Well, I think we both have just a general aversion to high school pitchers, just based on kind of a with pretty large data set now that it's just such a risky play to begin with,
Mhm.
especially high velocity high school arms. Which it's they I can't think of a single guy that's like dialed up to 100 in high school and actually made it. So I would much prefer that to come out of my college pitchers than my high school pitchers. Granted, I think where they differ from hitters is that the development peaks at a certain age for hitters, whereas I think pitchers take a little bit longer. Therefore, you're probably getting guys in their prime at 25, 26. And pitchers in high school, I think, flame out a lot quicker than those who go through the 4 years of college. I think you get a lot more attention to development in college. I think there's a lot that goes into that. So we both agree with that there.
Huh?
Um, and we also prioritize those college pitchers that have that high K to walk. It shows that they at least show some type of command and they have the
Mhm.
stuff to get batters out. Not just getting them out, but striking them out. Then some
Right.
hitters are not able to hit it, and they are putting it where they want to. So I think if you have a nice K to walk ratio, a lot of other problems can be solved. You know, even with like a high ERA, there could be a lot. Which ERA is not exactly the stat we want to use, but it is kind of tough to find advanced college metrics.
Yep.
So you do have to kind of use some caveman stats to kind of tell a story for you there. But yeah, I think if when we're trying to look at the story and I'm trying to pitch a guy to dad, we both agree that good K to walk and good college arm. He's got some decent stuff. We'll take a shot on him. It seems to be the formula.
I got it. I got it. I was talking with Jeff, on a podcast once about high school versus college arms,
Mhm.
and it's interesting. There's a study in Baseball HQ on this, which I shared with him, and I can share it with you after the podcast if
Sure.
you want. Because I think a lot of people have the same kind of mentality that you just articulated, the same perspective. And I think that's something that Jeff shares too. Although he's very bullish on college hitters in particular.
Mhm.
But on the terms of the pitching side, um, the in terms of outcome, what Baseball HQ was saying was that the high school pitchers actually have higher ceilings and higher like peak rates than the college arms, on the theory that they were good enough to be drafted in high school and went directly into the pit. But the risk factor is higher with them too. So
Absolutely.
it's a much higher ceiling in most cases.
Hmm.
Not in all. I mean, there are no absolutes here, right? I mean, Paul Skeens exists.
Yep.
But you can take a chance on one of these guys, and you could have the Andrew Painter types or the Yuri Perez types, right? Yuri's a little bit different, but there is risk.
Yes.
They have the same injury risk, basically. you know,
Yep.
because they all have the same injury risk. But it's just interesting to me, like the philosophy go with it, to shy away from high school players or go with them. Um, I tend to be, as everybody knows, like more willing to like draft like teenagers, and that's one of the reasons that I am. But it really has to do with your risk tolerance, because it's high. The risk is very, very high, particularly also because they're just not fully formed people yet. Their bodies just aren't. You don't know which way things are going to turn for them. Some players just don't physically mature like you expect them to.
Right, but that's where you're able to garner a huge profit, because you can get
Yeah.
this high school arm that can peak, and I absolutely agree with that with what HQ is saying, because one of my guys that I have a crush here for you later on, high school arm. So it's not I'm not that much of a hater, but this is one of those high school arms that has such a high peak,
Yep.
only 20 years old, that you wouldn't get that type of a peak at that young of an age through a college arm. So
Yep.
I think it's definitely risk tolerance based. I absolutely agree with you there. And I think because pitchers are so risky, I will take as little risk as I could possibly manage when it comes
Yep.
to pitchers.
No, I
So,
hear
yeah.
you. I hear you. We can talk a little bit more about pitching too, because I my view on pitching in the ABL is much different than it is in a lot of other leagues, particularly because of how high the pitcher prices are in the auction. So I have shifted my minors to have a lot more pitching
Mhm.
than I normally would, and a lot of it's older. So I have like both like guys who are proximity to the majors, but I just drafted like a bunch of teenagers
Yep.
to supplement them as years go along. So I basically am trying to get a conveyor belt of pitchers
No, it makes
that
sense.
will all be cheap, and then allocate all that draft money to hitting. Um, my goal is to have like no pitchers over $15.
Ooh,
So
that'd be nasty. That's scary stuff,
yeah,
if true.
I mean, it works out. I mean, the problem is they all get hurt, and
Sure, but I mean, still, that's still that future sounds nice. That utopia of pitchers. That sounds
yeah,
awesome. Definitely.
so that's the goal. We'll see if I get there. We'll see if I get there. All right. Well, so talk about the shenanigans in the draft, maybe, and maybe some of the downside of partnering with Dad, because we really didn't touch on that fully yet.
Yeah, really, it was the fact that I knew every single pick that I was up. There was there was that part in the back of my head that's like, okay, I had this guy keyed up, and if I let him slide, Dad definitely knows I'm in on him, and I know Dad likes him. So I felt like I had to reach for some of my guys. Granted, there wasn't a ton of overlap between ACL and ABL with
Mhm.
who I acquired. But it is tough when someone else knows how you feel about another prospect, and like it's a little bit nerve wracking. Of like, I mean, I could have sold him. I might have done a good job selling him to Dad. So
Yep.
I better be careful here. I don't want to overextend myself, because I could have reached for him in ACL too. I don't know. I have no idea how to value this guy, but I know there's one other team out there that knows about him and likes him. So yeah, it was I think the pros far outweighed the cons, but the
Yep.
cons were a little bit annoying when they popped up. So
Yeah, yeah. We were talking before the show just about some of these problems that can crop up when you're in multiple leagues with people.
mhm.
It is different being on the same team where you're actually sharing ideas. But I'm in a number of leagues with Evan and Jeff and Tom, and all those guys know the prospects I like. Like
Absolutely.
I'm in multiple leagues with Dylan now too. I mean, so it's like they all know the guys I like, and so then they know who I'm going to draft. They know what players I'm targeting. I mean, it's almost like there are no secrets. So in
We
some
also have a
respects,
podcast talking about prospects, so that might also hinder.
yeah, that has something to do with it. It's like, yeah, it's probably not a good trade secret. He's not a good keeper of trade secrets.
Yeah, yeah.
But like I think you just have to kind of like roll with it and do your thing.
Yep.
You just can't, and stay disciplined. Like what I try to do now is not reach for guys that just because like I'm worried about somebody sniping me on them. I'm just like
I get them when I get them.
yeah, they're either going to be there or they're not, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but it's interesting. It adds a level of like complexity to all this, which is
Mhm.
already a very complex league, particularly when it comes to like finding prospects. And Tom and I like a lot of the same players. We're not. It's not a complete like overlap, but there's definitely like a Venn diagram kind of thing going on where like, I'm always worried about Tom getting to a guy before me. He probably worries about it less, but
Yeah, I do see Tom taking on similar types of risk, so absolutely opens you guys up to similar players. So
yeah,
that makes a lot of sense for sure.
yeah, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of the trades you made,
Sure.
both last year and heading into the draft this year, as well as one of your draft picks that a player I like a lot. So let's talk first about this really interesting trade you made, which was Cutter Crawford for Hope and Chase Hampton. And I
Mhm.
put their respective scores in the prospect handbook, and Hope's in the top 60 in the handbook. You mentioned you wanted Hope during the season, and Rourke got to him on the waiver wire by bidding $1 more.
Yep.
So maybe talk about like targeting these prospects and why you wanted them, and whether or not they were the top guys you wanted.
I would say I think I gave Rourke approached me for Cutter. 'Cause I'd already put him out my dump proclamation. I want to say Cutter had one other team interested, but I think Rourke was for sure the most serious. It was
Hmm.
been before an offer was made. And as we were talking, usually what I'll do is I'll shoot out a list of like, hey, I'm interested in these guys. What do you think? Hope and Hampton were on that. Rourke kind of gave me a list of who I was comfortable dealing. Hope and Hampton were on that. So I was like, okay, I think we can work with something here. And sure enough, we were able to get a deal done where I got both of them, and I was stoked, absolutely stoked to get them. Like I said, Hope I had already wanted, was not able to get. I'm gonna have to use a cough button here. One second. All right, professional. But I was
See,
able
that's
to
that's a pro podcaster move right there.
but, yeah, I was absolutely stoked to get Hope finally, because I was a little worried that his stock had gone up because Hope was still doing Hope things in the meantime when I didn't have him. When I had seen him and tried to acquire him to the point to when I traded for, Cutter, he was still hitting the ball like crazy, so a little bit concerned that maybe I was just gonna be able to get Hope only. And
Yep.
and he was still in rookie ball, so a
Mhm.
lot still improving. He hadn't gone to A ball, still doing the same thing. So there was a little bit of risk involved, and then Hampton was injured at the time.
Yep.
Of course, still injured now, thanks to Tommy John. So I Hampton fits the mold for me for an older pitcher who's got really solid command, high K to walk.
Yep.
Um, but I also thought the injury was going to make him a solid buy low candidate.
Yep.
And on a team that I think is pretty okay with developing talent, they're not maybe the best of the best, but I think the Yankees at least know what they're doing. So I felt comfortable acquiring both of them, especially for giving up Cutter Crawford. Very happy with what I got.
Yeah, no, the acquisition cost, right, is always a factor here, and I mean, giving up Cutter Crawford, you weren't going to keep anyway, probably, right? So he was
No,
expiring
he
contract,
was
right?
expiring contract,
Yeah,
so no.
right. I mean, so you're giving up basically nothing at that point.
Hmm.
Now, obviously, for Rourke, he thinks he's getting an arm that can be useful to him in the playoffs. So I understand that. But, getting those two prospects, are both pretty high end prospects, and Chase Hampton is a guy before his injury who was getting a ton of hype and was a prospect list darling.
Yeah.
So I agree, it's an interesting buy low. Always questions about how they'll rebound from Tommy John and how long it'll take to get the command back. So this might go to your point about like, being patient.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yes,
yeah,
I'm not selling Hampton right away because I'm worried about the TJ, which I'm not gonna. It could be better. I'm not gonna lie and say that I'm fired up here as TJ. But I guess if there's one plus side to it, it's like we're getting out of the way earlier than it could be. So I'd rather this than you're 20. He's 27 years old now. He has TJ. Da 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 da. So
right.
let's get it done now.
Yeah, fortunately for some of us, people have seconds or thirds.
Yes, yes.
Right, multiple helpings of TJ.
I'm just taking my wrist tendon now. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I like that part of the acquisition, particularly because the point I was making earlier about the pitching cost in ABL at the major league level. Getting cheap pitching and having like options, I think, is really helpful in this format, because I'd much rather spend my dollars elsewhere. And I'm not convinced that there's actually any real such thing as a like proven reliable starting pitcher. There might be like three of them. you
Yes.
know,
Correct. Correct.
right? Right. So like I'm willing to like spend less and get like multiple guys to choose from. And I think Hampton has a lot of upside. He's an interesting play, particularly because of the command that you mentioned. Um, he has a good shot at staying in the rotation, assuming he can stay healthy. He's a reasonably sized kid. Should be fairly durable.
Mhm.
Aside from the obvious arm risk that all the pitchers face, and he's just having to suffer right now. But talk to me a little bit about Hope and why you were so like hot to trot on him.
I think I loved the swing, which is a very old guy take, like just to
Mhm.
say, like, man, what look at that kid's swing. But it was just it was an even tempered swing, and I just the amount of the type of contact he was making, it was consistent hard contact. Granted, it was rookie ball, so you really got to grade it on a curve.
Mhm.
But even then, he wasn't a top 100 prospect at the time when I was looking at him either. So the amount of hard contact I was seeing at such a young age for himself. So it's not like he was 20 years old in rookie ball beating up on these kids. No, I mean he was young himself. So I was absolutely all over that, wanting to acquire him the second I had seen that slash line. Um, and I was apparently I was a day too late, I guess,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah, yeah.
kind of the I guess a good summation of ABL. Always a day too late. So we got a lot of guys with the a lot of hawks around here. So
There
it does
are a
not
lot of
surprise me.
Hawks. There
It
are a
does
lot of
it
Hawks.
does not surprise me.
Yeah, yeah. It's happened to all of us.
Yep.
Somebody beats you to your guy. It's all right.
But no, Hope's ability to make quality contact definitely. Yeah, I had my eyes on that for sure.
Yeah, and the Dodgers are an interesting organization for developing talent. I mean, they've struggled in many ways to develop consistently, at least, major league hitters. I mean, there are exceptions. They have some guys who have come up and played very well,
Mhm.
but Gavin Lux comes to mind as somebody who is like really, a hot prospect that
Yep.
has really struggled throughout his career. And there are other examples of that as well. They did develop Cody Bellinger, who's had kind of a mercurial kind of career at the major league level, but is obviously a talented ball player. Um, It'll be really interesting to me to see how Dalton Rushing does when he gets called up, which is presumably going to happen pretty soon. Um, but Hope is a young guy who makes, as you said, really hard contact. Has some speed,
Mhm.
which is nice in this format. And the last time I looked, he was striking out at a pretty good clip, which was a little concerning.
I believe so, yes, which I figure it's gonna happen when you get moved up. It's just adjusting to that next level.
Yeah.
You like to see if it when it doesn't happen, but I knew it was gonna be growing pains for sure because he was doing too well in rookie ball to not have regression. Right now, it looks like this year he's actually at 23% K rate
Oh, it's
with
come
a
down. It's come down
15%
though.
walk rate. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
come down.
thankfully, but
That's
still
good.
an 1100 OPS. So I'm
Yeah.
absolutely stoked for that in full season A ball. Absolutely
Yeah.
stoked. For 20 years old, full season A, we will take that for how it's
Yeah.
early, obviously, but still
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah. I think when I looked at him earlier this year, he was up closer to 30%. So I'm glad it's come back down to below
Yeah.
25. And look, in the ABL, another interesting thing about the format, because we have point scoring, I'm more tolerant of hit tool issues, because they can get points in rapid succession from other things, including his speed, his power. There are a lot of ways to rack up points. Um,
You're also not
Even,
getting dinged for strikeouts, which is a main
exactly.
problem with hit tool. So yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly. So like I'm much more forgiving in this format than I might be, for example, in a batting average league.
Yep.
Um, where the hope would probably go down a little bit for me, although not a lot. His hit tool at grade is actually pretty solid. But when I saw that earlier this year, that strikeout rate, it concerned me. So I'm glad he's back down.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'd also like to see him get up to high A ball. At his age, at 20 years old at A ball, he's fine. He's kind of right where you'd hope he'd be,
Mhm.
but it'd be really nice to see him kind of at high A at some point, by
Well, I
mid-season.
I think he he has a full season A ball. He's now at high A at the
Oh, he's
moment.
at high
So
A. Good,
he is
good.
at high A
Good.
right now.
Yeah. You can see
So
I didn't look
I'm
him up prior to the show.
sure,
Yeah.
but I'm hoping like double A,
Yeah, that'd be
by end
great.
of season.
If he
Would
gets
be
promoted to
stoked.
double A, that's big.
And at
Um,
this pace, I'm thinking yes, but again, early.
Yep, very early. That's exciting though. Exciting. So you got your man, and
Yep.
you also got Hampton and to boot, which is nice.
Yeah,
So
it's just a kind of a wait and see one on that one, but yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. So let's talk about another trade. and ironically, this one was also with Rourke. um,
He's a great deal with for sure, but yeah.
yeah. So this is a draft day trade, or just before draft
Mhm,
day trade. You traded pick 1.4
mhm,
for pick 220, Kyle Teal, and Moises Chase, which I think is a really interesting trade for a lot of reasons. You got two like pretty good prospects in that deal, plus the opportunity to draft another one. And 1.4 at the time was kind of a soft spot for a lot of people in the draft. They didn't really know who to pick there. This draft class was really kind of like underwhelming for a lot of people. Um, so Rourke comes in and he actually drafts Cam Smith, 1.4, which is much higher than I think a lot of people had Cam Smith. In most of the drafts that I saw, I was going late first round.
yeah.
And obviously that worked out gangbusters for him in a lot of ways because Cam Smith went right to the major leagues this year after like a really short amount of time at Double A last year and this year. Last year, excuse me, went straight to the majors this year. He obviously has struggled, but he last night he had 2 home runs, and he seems to be starting to make harder contact and finding his way a little bit. So we'll see how that turns out. But talk to me about that trade, why you pulled out a 1.4,
Mhm.
and why you felt this was a good return for you.
Well, it was really just to test the market because I'd seen like Alan had dealt his pick. I don't think my dad had dealt his pick because, but yeah, my dad kept his, but he put it out there. And Alan's return was solid, so I was like, okay, we'll at least see. It's not 1-1, but 1-1 is also not as consensus as it usually is year over year.
Mhm.
So let's see what 1-4 looks like because I thought I had kind of locked in the top three, which thankfully I did. I would have been kind of peeved if Weatherholt or Kurtz would have been there at 4. Um, but that top three of Benzana and Kurtz and I just said Weatherholt. I was pretty sure for a couple months that was going to be it.
Mhm.
Um, so I was not too interested in what was there afterwards because I think the next option in my head was like, okay, Chase Burns. I like Chase Burns, I really do. I think he has just elite stuff. But I don't want to take a picture that high, really. So I'd like to, I guess, kind of diversify the portfolio a bit, and
Yep.
instead of putting it all into one stock, kind of just split it out in stocks I still like that I think are going to grow over time.
Mhm.
Um, so that's what I did. I put it out there. I had probably about 6 teams approach me for it. I had open lines of communications with a few of them throughout, the ones I
Yeah.
thought were really serious. There was a point where I was going to make a deal for a couple mid first. I was pretty happy with, but there was a miscommunication there as to what the deal entailed, and I
Ah.
was not interested anymore. And yeah, I don't know really what happened or where we thought we got off track, but yeah, unfortunately, it fell apart. And luckily, Rourke and I were still talking, and we the deal looked a little bit different for Chase and gosh, what was it? It was Chase and who am I thinking? Teal,
Uh-huh.
and the pick, of course. So
Yeah.
it did change throughout, um, but no, very happy with what I got. Honestly, super stoked to get a couple prospects I think are solid, and a pick where I was able to get Cobb Hightower, who I'm pretty high on. So yeah,
Yeah.
overall pretty solid.
Yeah. There was that trade stood out to me because I just thought it was a very interesting return for 1.4. And I like Chase a lot, and Teal's an interesting hitter, catcher. We'll see how he develops,
Mhm.
but could be the everyday catcher in that lineup.
I'm hoping he sticks there. I don't know what their plan is with Kiro,
Yeah,
but my main thing is that I don't want to pay for catcher again because I'm already paying out the wazoo for Adley. I'm not interested in doing that again.
yeah,
Absolutely, I have an infatuation with Adley, but I'm not interested in paying that price anymore.
yep,
So if I can get a hitter like Teal, who I think is just a really well polished bat, and it sticks at catcher, I'm pretty happy with that,
yep,
especially
yep,
for giving up what I gave up. And Chase is a risky option. I think he kind of does not fit my mold
yeah,
of command.
yep.
But this arsenal is so good that I'm willing to see what happens with it.
Yep.
Um,
A lot of
I
upside. A
yeah,
lot of upside.
yeah, definitely a lot of upside. So I think I have enough pitchers that fit that same mold of low risk, good K to walk. That
Yep,
let's take a low risk on Chase and see what that kind of molds into. Hopefully, something that's what elite, like I'm hoping. But
yep,
yeah, it's the command's a little bit shaky. So
yep. It is, and the Phillies are like another interesting organization in terms of developing pitchers. They brought a lot of guys up to the major leagues, some with
Mhm.
wild success, and others, burning out. But a pretty good track record overall.
Yeah.
I think injuries has been more the issue for them than anything else. But they have a lot of guys now that are really contributing to their major league rotation who came up through their system.
Mhm.
So we'll see what happens with Chase. It's an interesting trade. Before we move on to the next transaction, I actually just wanted to go back to the Cutter Crawford trade for a second because it just occurred to me that Rourke, who's a Red Sox fan, acquires Cutter Crawford and gets rid of a Dodger and a Yankee.
I mean if I was smarter, I would say that was intentional. But
Yeah,
fortunately, I just saw two players I liked. I'm like, how about those guys? Was that work
yeah,
for you? But no, I probably should have played that in there and like, this could be this could be a pretty easy sell for the guy,
yeah. Rourke really likes his Red Sox.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. So
He got one of he definitely stole a guy from us in ACL. I can't remember who it was right now, but yeah, he is definitely high on the Red Sox.
yeah, yeah. Well, and look, they have a great farm system right now. So
Oh yeah, if you're
and,
gonna
and,
if you're gonna
and
go
a
crazy
good,
for a system, it's probably the Red Sox. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, I just thought that was funny. So let's talk about your first round draft pick because you,
mhm,
you did still have a first.
mhm.
At 1.30, you took Vance Honeycutt, who is a guy that I like. So talking about Vance, what made you go after him?
Well, I've been I was following Honeycutt because he was in 2023. He was I'd say a consensus top 5 pick. Uh, but his stock fell based on what was cited as like contact issues, and I don't understand that. Like, I don't understand that because his entire slash line went up, his Ks went down, but that was all people were talking about was contact issues, which I didn't go through every single at bat of Honeycutt's to really like, figure out does he have a massive hole I'm missing. But even now, this year, he's still got like OPS over 840. So
Yep.
I don't not I don't really know what people were talking about, but I was absolutely keyed up on Honeycutt and Burkholder. Those were the two that I was pretty big on. I wasn't gonna get Burkholder that low, but like, as far
Yep.
as just like outfitters I liked going into the draft, those two were on there.
Yeah.
Um, but I just kept seeing Honeycutt's name drop and drop and drop because I think he also fell in ACL to
Yep.
Duke. Um, and I took note of that. I'm like, okay, Honeycutt is definitely falling farther than I thought. And that
Mhm.
was in the draft that, it's startup, so I wasn't sure what that meant for us in
Yeah.
ABL. But yeah, I was stoked to get Honeycutt that low for sure.
Yeah. I look, for the same reason I mentioned about the hit tool not being such an issue in this league. I really like Honeycutt
Hmm.
and the value. Particularly the acquisition cost you paid at 130 at the end of the first round. You get a guy who could really fill up a stat sheet,
Yeah.
and could score a lot of points for you because there's a lot of ways to get points in our scoring system. He could be a cheap outfielder in a good organization. The Orioles have developed a lot of hitters, and they advance them pretty aggressively as well. So this kid could be up in the majors like soon. And if his hit tool ends up being a suspect hit tool, he's going to end up playing in a bandbox of a ballpark, and he can still generate a lot of points, even if he's a
Hmm.
240 hitter. Now if he ends up being a 260 hitter, that's great. I don't, he's probably never going to be a 280 hitter, but like that's
No,
okay.
I didn't think so. No.
You know, so I like that value at 130, and it's all about acquisition cost there.
Yeah, and I also got the pick for like Sean Sullivan of the Rockies, who I got like I think in the third or fourth round last year. So I guess would you do a first round pick for a third or fourth round pick previous year? Probably.
Yeah,
If someone said, "Hey, here's a first round pick, you gotta give me a third or fourth round pick," I think you're probably gonna do that. Um, so I got it for I think relatively cheap, and I'm not a huge fan of Sean Sullivan in cores. I
yeah.
just thought he had really decent. I don't want to say stuff, but off the charts command, and that he would be good in the minors. I could flip it later, which I did. So
Which you did.
yeah.
Which you did. Speaking of which, before we get to a guy with questionable command and Grant Taylor, who I'm going to talk about, you just mentioned pitching in cores, and so last podcast I had Josh on. We talked about Chase Dollander, who is your guy in this league.
I
So,
was all for the Dollander talk for sure. Loved it.
so what did you think of that analysis? As an initial question, and then secondly, how have you enjoyed watching him pitch?
Well, as far as the analysis, I love seeing a nerd in flow state. And Josh was absolutely locked in that whole time. Absolutely loved it, the whole dissertation of altitude and everything. I thought that he made great points, and obviously, like the Rockies agree, and that's why they go and get these guys with bullet sliders. So I thought it was really well done, well presented. But I Dolander was another one that really fell in the previous year's draft because that was a draft where I got, let's see, pitchers. I got Quinn Matthews, Sean Sullivan, Chase Dolander, and Jake Bloss. And Jake Bloss isn't sexy, but he's the only first one to debut out of all of them.
Right.
So to get a few solid prospects, a guy I got a first round pick for, and a big leaguer. I'm very happy with that draft class. But Dolander was I didn't have a first round pick in that draft at all. So getting Dolander in the second round,
Yeah.
he just kept falling. People were scared because of Coors. I was
Yep.
not scared of Coors. I thought Dolander's stuff was elite and stays elite. I don't know. I don't know. The Coors effect is very real,
Yep.
and it is a concern. But like Josh brought up, if someone's going to beat Coors, it's going to be Dolander, and if he doesn't beat it, then just raise the whole stadium. Just get rid of the whole stadium, move the team. It's there's no reason to be here if we're not going to have a pitcher ever in our lifetime. But yeah, I'm hoping Dolander's the one. I
I keep
think he's
thinking
at
of
the arsenal.
David Need, the Rockies' first overall draft pick. Who was supposed to be this like
Mm.
terrific starting pitcher and ended up like just getting crushed at Coors.
There's just been so many. I mean, well, Freeland was on there, John Gray, Riley
Yeah.
Pint. I mean, it's just been a whole just a merry-go-round of guys who can't do anything. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, Dolander's pitching later this afternoon, so
Yep.
we'll be wrapped up before that happens to let you go watch that part of the afternoon baseball slate. But I've been monitoring how he's doing. He's pitching at Coors today, so we'll be
Mhm.
seeing lots of bullet sliders apparently.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, and every time we see one, we'll think of Josh.
I 100%. I will never not. I will never not. Whenever I see him, when I ever see Dolander's 10 strikeout game, I'll think, "Dang it, that's that bullet slider
Bullet
again."
slider, bullet slider. That's right. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Grant Taylor, who's
Mhm.
not on your team, but he's on Evan's team, the Astros.
That's good
Uh,
enough. I mean, keep him on that team. Just I
yeah,
don't want him. You keep him
there,
over
there
there.
you go. All right, we'll talk about this. So, I wanted to talk about a scouting report that I read on Grant yesterday from Baseball HQ, which is one of the sources that I use for the prospect handbook. And so, in the handbook this year, I gave Taylor a 7.56, which is a pretty good grade. It's above average regular, potential all star. Baseball America gave him a 55E, which is above average, but extreme risk. Okay. And so in this scouting report, Chris Blessing, who's one of the editors of their minor league forecaster, so he does, along with a couple other guys, he does all their prospecting grades. He had a live scouting session and saw Noah Schultz and Grant Taylor over a couple days, and he gave him an 8D, which is above average but very high risk, which is actually slightly better grade on the risk factor from where he was graded preseason, which was an 8E. So we'll have to monitor that, and I'm interested in actually understanding why Blessing improved his risk rating, given what he said. But I put some quotes from the scouting report, and this is just part of it. And a lot of these quotes have like telltale things that I look for as warning signs about players. So I wanted to like talk about them and get your reaction to them, Cal. Uh, they say he has tremendous ability, but they're not sure where he's going to play. And for a pitcher, there are only two places to play: in a
Yeah, I
rotation or in the bullpen, right? And the relief pitchers have much less value than starting pitching, right? Because they're more fungible, right? There are a lot of good relief pitchers, pop-up guys all the time. People you've never heard of become relief pitchers. There's a lot of competition as a result. All the failed starters can move over into bullpens and the like, right? So if this kid ends up in the bullpen, that's a much different story than if he's in a rotation. So what do they say about him? Taylor has an athletic delivery. All right, so just stop there for a second. Whenever you hear a guy having athletic delivery, that's only slightly better than max effort delivery.
I
When you
like
read,
repeatable, but
yeah, right. When you hear max effort delivery, when you read that, what I hear in my head is Tommy John surgery or shoulder
yes.
surgery, and like they're not going to be repeatable in terms of their command. It raises questions about whether they're going to be consistent strike throwers. So athletic delivery. right, is kind of a nicer way to say max effort delivery. And so that's like, usually scouts talk about it. And when they use that language as opposed to max effort, they think this guy is a good athlete and then maybe he can overcome it, right? But it's still like a yellow flag for me, right? If it had said max effort, I'd be like, this guy's in trouble.
Yeah.
All right. So he goes on to say he gets 7-foot extension. He's 6'3", but he's getting 7-foot extension, and he's able to do that through this max effort or this athletic delivery. And he says Taylor incorporates every part of his body to achieve that extension. Now he has tremendous stuff, and he can strike out people at high rates. But what's interesting here is the indication that he's doing that at the expense of like throwing himself into every single pitch, right? That raises an injury concern to me, right? And it also raises a command issue, right? Because when players are like going max effort all the time or really throwing their whole body into things, it's harder to control the ball. And so what he says next, he says, for me, it is generous to say he has 30 grade command.
Is baseball? I don't pay for baseball HQ. I've never really done it, but so I don't know the tone of the scouting reports. Is it always that scathing? Because that feels
No,
like
it is
harsh.
not.
Yikes.
It is not. This is a crushing statement. It is
Wow.
generous to say he has 30 command.
That is brutal.
Right? Now, I put up top in the first line that Baseball America, another publication I think the world of, gave him a preseason 50 grade control, which is much
Huge difference.
Better, okay?
Yeah.
So it'll be really interesting to see as the year progresses and Taylor, gets more innings under his belt. He only has like a whopping 24 innings professionally or something like that, plus a handful of innings in the Arizona Fall League. But this year, he's been walking the park at an alarming rate. And he got lit up like a Christmas tree in the Arizona Fall League, too, for a lot of the same issues. His command was much better last year in 19 innings.
Yeah, so I wonder, was it just because he's a college arm and he comes in and he's playing rookie ball hitters or A ball hitters, and it's worse than the talent he was already facing in the SEC. Did he just have an easier time with it? It seems like, and then he gets exposed the second he has to face someone at his level. I don't know, but does not look good.
No, it does not look good, but it's an interesting warning sign, something to monitor. It wouldn't mean that I would punt on Taylor at this point because he has electric stuff, but you don't want to read a scouting report like this. Like, generous to say 30 grade command. And then it concludes by saying, if it was up to him, he'd put him in the bullpen. And even then, he might not be a closer.
Wow.
Right. It literally says that. It's like he might not ever be trusted to get guys out in leverage situations. So not the prospect report that you want to read, the scouting report on a prospect you want to read.
Especially from the best pitching prospect in baseball, from what I've heard from other sources.
Yeah, right.
We won't name
on this guy, which, I understand the guy has electric stuff. But it'll be very interesting to see how he progresses and whether Baseball HQ, for example, is more charitable later on in the year as he gets more innings. It's a very small sample size.
It's cold. We'll just say that. It's cold out in Birmingham, Alabama. It's very chilly. So in the southern climate of Alabama, he's having a tough time adjusting.
Yeah. So, it's a very small sample size, so I take it with a grain of salt. And the other thing to take with a grain of salt is these look-ins, right? They're one day. And if his command was particularly bad that day for whatever reason, it could create an outsized impression on a scout. So what I want to see is additional look-ins and have people who have looked at tape on him as well as seeing him live. And so we'll get a narrative on him as the season progresses, and I'll be very interested to see what Baseball America has to say about him in midseason, and whether HQ has more opportunities to go out and see him live. Because they usually, before definitively coming up with a prospect grade, they see people multiple times. And then also look at tape and other things. They talk to scouts in the region. So, premature to write Grant Taylor off, but that did catch my eye. And since our dear friend Evan has been promoting Grant Taylor as being Cy Young, I thought it'd be worthwhile to kind of talk about him on the podcast. So with the time we have left, I wanted to talk about my favorite part of the show, which is crushes and fades.
Perfect.
And see if you had any crushes and fades for us.
I got a massive crush, and this dude he checks the boxes of what I like to see in a pitcher, and I just like watching. I like watching him pitch. It's just fun to watch him work, and it's Thomas White. Um, and I don't think I don't think it's crazy a crazy thing to say that one of the top pitching prospects in baseball you have a crush on. But I figured we'd keep it pretty on the up and up here with as far as who the crushes are. I wasn't going to go digging too deep. But Tommy White is just everything you kind of want in a pitcher. It's like 6'5", 240, just well built, repeatable delivery, pretty much the opposite of Grant Taylor. Great command, I definitely think, and he is a high school arm, so it's out of my these are the guys I miss out on, when I'm being prejudiced against high school arms.
Yep.
But someone like this, I feel I don't know what his size was at coming out of high school, but that size and that arsenal, we're looking at frontline stuff here, and I'm absolutely all over Thomas White. I think he's awesome.
Yeah, I'm a big White fan as well. I got zero shares of him in those drafts, that draft class. There were actually a couple good prospects, pitching prospects that year who were a similar age and frame. So I got some of the other guys, but like White is a guy I really like, and he's obviously now taken off. Like you can't buy him anymore, like
Mhm.
because the acquisition cost is going to be enormous. Which is another interesting thing about pitching prospects, right? You talk about buying Chase Hampton low, you know, because of the risk inherent in a lot of these guys, I always like to acquire them for close to nothing. So the risk in spending a first round draft pick, for example, you mentioned Burns at number 5, right? The risk there is that he's a pitcher,
Mhm.
right? And pitching in Cincinnati is not exactly ideal either, by the way. But he's so talented; it's very hard to pass up on him in the middle of the first round. White was a guy you probably could have gotten in like the second or third round of a draft, depending on the league format. Um, you know, do I like him better at 3 than at 2? I sure do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, some of these guys struggle like initially when they first come to the league, and that's a good chance to buy low on them. If people run out of the patience you talked about at the beginning of the show. But I really like White quite a lot, and he was a big frame kid coming out of high school too. What you usually see is them put on weight, which is that's what you want to see.
And that's what I'm saying. I don't know if he was like this 6'4", 6'3" skinny kid coming out of high school, and then he just gets a couple inches, and then he beefs up. I don't recall what his build was like out of high school, but man, he just on the mound, he's a presence, and
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
everything you want to see in an ace. So
Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely. I'm trying to remember which year he came out in it because was that the Andrew Painter year?
Well, age-wise, I feels he's 20, so I think Painter's 21, so maybe
Maybe the
there's
year before. Like, yeah, I remember there were back-to-back years where there were a lot of these pictures of that kind of like frame, and
mm,
there were 18-year-olds coming out. Because I was a huge Painter guy when he was coming out of high school. Obviously, he's had his own injury issues as well.
yeah, yeah, which he's I guess it's kinda like there's just more time to be injured and you're developing that body. You
Yeah,
may have the elite stuff and the elite secondaries. I think the elite secondaries was originally what was the problem, but now it's velo. Because with high school arms, these high school arms
yeah,
are also subject to a ton of travel ball. So
yep,
that's also a major worry. Whereas college, they're not subject to that, so they can at least kind of taper off the amount of stress on the arm
yep,
versus what their high school days were like. So I'm that was kind of my main thing earlier was that level of arm care that you get for 3 or 4 years to
yeah,
before you get called up. So, but there are some seriously successful stories where, granted, they haven't touched a big league mound yet, but
yep,
prospects like Andrew Painter and Tommy White are you can't miss them.
yep.
Those are elite talents there.
Yeah, he's an exciting ball player for sure. All right, so you got a fade for me?
This is it's not. I'm not going on a limb here. Really, it's just kind of like if you have a share, I'm pretty much over it. And this is me going against the patience thing I said earlier. But Ethan, I think the Ethan Salas thing is pretty much done. Like I know he's only 19 years old, but I, I don't know what we were sold. I think we were sold just a fool's gold on that one. Which I want your take on it because you had have been all over Ethan Salas just being like a J15 kid. So I'm curious as to what am I missing when it comes to Ethan Salas being so high originally. Even when he was top 10, I was surprised to see him that high, that quickly with limited sample size and limited showing anything really.
Yeah.
showing the tools that were touted. I kind of wanted your take on it because I'm kind of out. I'm out on Ethan Salas. I
Sure.
just don't see it.
So, he's an interesting case study. Ethan Salas was, J15,
Mhm.
and skipped the DSL, right? And went right into A ball. Skipped rookie ball. Went like, the CPX ball, I should say, complex
Yeah.
ball. He went right into like, A ball. And then very quickly thereafter, high A, and then double A, all at age 17.
Mhm.
Okay. At a position where defense really matters, and it's very difficult to learn how to start becoming a major league catcher. And I think he's immensely talented behind the plate as a defender. Um, and the Padres really like him, so they were like, pushing him. But I think they misread how mature his bat was, and you saw a huge setback in terms of his performance. He got demoted, so he went from like double A, now he's at high A ball again, and now he's back up to A ball. Excuse me, double A ball in 2025. So and he's just starting there at double A as a 19-year-old.
Mhm.
Okay, so he's very young for the level. Um,
Yeah,
and
because he didn't even earn the promotion. He had an OPS of 600
yeah,
at A ball. So I don't know where the Padres saw that and was like, okay, he's ready.
yeah.
We're
So
just gonna call him up.
yeah. So the things that I like about Ethan Salas, right, are his walk rate, which is double digits.
Sure, shows discipline.
Yeah, and his strikeout rate has come down, 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 down.
That's good.
Right, so he's right now striking out at 12.2%, and he's walking at 14.6. So he walks more than he Ks. Now that's only like 41 plate appearances.
So is
Okay?
there just like a lack of hard contact then? Because if the ball is now being put in play more based on the less strikeouts and the more walks, is it just it's just quality contact's not there?
I think there's two things. I think that's part of it. Keep in mind, he's just now 19 years old.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, he's so young. That's why it's hard for me to put fade. But I'm like, screw it. We're just gonna do fades anyways because it's
right.
what seconds for.
Right. So like he's got a BABIP of 214. So the balls he's hitting aren't going in for hits.
Yeah.
Right. There could be a lot of reasons for that.
Yeah, because people will just say, "Oh, it's luck. He's getting unlucky." It's like there's a lot of things that go into luck, and without like some type of savant page to know
Yeah.
how hard that ball is coming off that bat or where it's barreled up at,
Yeah. So
it's
what
it's
I would
hard to
want to
say.
see, yeah, and it's his isolated power is concerning. Um, you know, right now it's 0.31,
Hmm. Oh,
which
oh,
is
ouch.
like
Okay,
not non-existent.
yeah.
Now in 290 at bats in 2023, excuse me, 290 plate appearances in 2023, he had a 173 ISO, which is respectable.
Yeah, I mean, you did 1/2, but even then, 173 at that age is solid.
Yeah, and his strikeout rate that year was 25.9%, 10% walk rate.
You can work with that. That's
Yeah.
but then is that top 10 prospect level probably at the age where he's at.
Well,
I
so
think
yeah,
it's like, wow, this kid's
right.
this kid's good.
So yeah, but he's still not hitting like for average or power really in game. So look, I guess my take on him is this: like, when Ethan Salas was coming out of the draft, I have one share of Ethan Salas. Actually, I now have two shares of Ethan Salas too. Um, you know, I loathe drafting catchers high, and the acquisition cost was just so high. So the one league I have, I subsequently acquired him. I got him after he fell, so I bought him what I thought was buying him low,
Sure.
right?
And the peak of a catcher is so the ceiling of a catcher is so low that makes sense that the acquisition cost is not worth it. So absolutely.
Yeah. So I ended up basically passing on him in a lot of drafts, even though I had him rated high. I was just like, I'm just not doing it. I'm just not taking a catcher, particularly somebody so young at catcher. It's a very hard position to reach the majors at, and it does emphasize catching. And I think he could be a great defensive catcher. So look, I think the Padres did him a disservice, by rushing him along. He wasn't ready. He certainly wasn't ready for a double A ball.
I don't
You
know
know,
who was in charge of that decision, but that was just crazy. The
yeah,
entire process. I put him on the face because I never really get to talk about Ethan Salas and rant about it, but it just
yeah.
feels like malpractice, like just complete.
Yeah, no, it's a problem, and like the Padres have done this with a couple players, and I think rushed them too quickly to the majors, and it ends up messing them up. I mean,
Mhm.
Mackenzie Gore is an interesting example, who
Oh,
wasn't
I was
quite
all over
ready.
Mackenzie Gore, though.
Yeah,
That was
well,
one of my high school exceptions.
I love Mackenzie Gore,
Yes.
and he's actually pitching well for Washington.
Yes. Very
You know,
excited to see him finally come into his own,
yeah,
yeah, I'm not a high school arm guy, like I already said, but Mackenzie Gore I was all over that one for sure.
big Mackenzie Gore fan,
Yeah.
and I'm glad to see him coming through. I'm all here for the breakout. Like,
Mm.
bring it, and I hope it continues. He actually is pitching, of course, against Dollander today, which is
Yeah, I
happening.
got them both. I got Gore and Dolander, so I'm just hoping it's a shutout. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. So, Ethan Salas at Double A ball, 19 years old. I'm very interested to see what he does offensively. He's off to a
Mhm.
slow start in terms of his surface stats. Not great, but I do like that walk to strikeout ratio a lot. And so we'll see what happens. He's got time to come into his own in terms of physicality as a hitter. I would like to see the hit tool continue to develop this way. And the question to me is whether he's going to hit it for enough power to make him worthwhile rostering. I think now the people who drafted him really high have really been burned, and you know, are never going to get that value back probably. But
Yeah.
can he be like a good fantasy catcher? He could. Um, if somebody was putting Ethan Salas on the block because they were like, giving up on him, like, I'd go trade for him. Sure. Um, because the acquisition cost should be lower now.
Yeah.
And so he's a kid, going to patience. Like, I'm willing to, like, you know, take him and, put him on, roster and let him sit there. And, if he fades out, it doesn't really cost me that much to cut him at this
Sure.
point,
Buy the dip. We're gonna buy the dip pretty much.
Yeah. So yeah, so I'm not out on Ethan Salas, I
Mhm.
guess. I just like, I'm disappointed in how he's been handled. But I see things between the raindrops here that are interesting to me, most notably the walk to strikeout ratio.
Yeah, showing discipline at the plate helps, but it doesn't translate into quality contact. I don't know. That's going to be
Yeah,
a real tough sell. At least the defense keeps them above water. I think that helps most catchers. That I would even prioritize a guy that you know a, a catching prospect that hits okay and is horrible at defense. I would
yeah,
probably trust the catcher that has better defense more because at least
yeah,
his proximity is higher
yeah,
because the teams prioritize that catcher more. And when those average hitters get moved off of catcher, they just become crappy, first
yeah,
basemen or regular fielders, and it's like your value's gone. Like it's
yeah.
nothing like it was.
Or a
So,
platoon player, it's just
or a
like,
platoon guy, yeah.
yeah. So like, we don't have advanced stat metrics on him because of the level he's at right now. Although somebody may have access to that. Fangraph
Yeah,
does.
I don't know how many A ball places have the trackmans or whatever those things are that can even take that data in. But
Yeah,
hopefully, once he moves up, or no, I guess double A parks. But I think
yeah.
most triple A's have that
Yeah,
type
they
of
have
data.
it.
I would think so.
He moves up there, but I'm hoping the Padres don't move him up. I think
Mhm.
he needs like a full year at Double A,
Yeah,
to really get a sense of who he is. Again, it's 41 plate appearances right now. You just can't really take too much stock in that. But I do see the improving strikeout rate is going down, and the walk rate is like steadily, at a level that's a plus level. Somebody who walks over 10% in this day and age is like,
it's a
you know,
miracle. I mean,
yeah. I
we,
mean
we
that's pretty
just
good.
getting on base in creative ways is what we need for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
So
it's a
yeah,
way to make up for the lack of average.
yeah,
But
so we
yeah,
definitely want to see some harder contact, some better quality contact, and
mhm.
definitely, I'm curious what's going on with that BABIP because um,
Super low. Yeah,
it's very very low, and I'm not sure whether it's because he's making just pathetic contact that nobody would get a hit on, or whether it's like some bad luck mixed in. But we'll see. Again, only 41 plate appearances, so it's
mhm.
like way too early to tell. But like he's an actually guy who'd be worthwhile checking in on midseason and to see where he is, um, because it can happen, but it's unusual for an organization to miss that badly on somebody,
Yes.
right? I mean, he could not be as good as you think he's going to be, but like you know, it would be surprising to me if Ethan Salas doesn't become a major league regular.
Oh,
Like,
okay. All right. And
it would be
that's
surprising.
exactly what I brought him up in the fades because I knew if there's gonna be one person that would make the case, it'd be you. So I was like, absolutely, I want to see what Steve thinks about Ethan Salas because
Yeah.
I'm
And let
not
me
having a good time.
let me be clear. Let me be clear about why I'm saying that. Like the Padres have invested a lot in him. They clearly believe in him.
Mhm.
His defense could get him to the majors. And do I think he's going to be a good regular? I'm not saying that. Like I don't know yet. But could I see him being like an everyday catcher? I could. No, and what does that mean for fantasy purposes? I mean, he could be like a guy gets drafted for $3 to $6 every year.
Right, but he's still an everyday catcher. You're
Yeah.
not gonna knock that.
I would be surprised if he doesn't achieve that. There's a risk that he never does. That's what we've seen. And you would have thought he was going to be Adley Rushman.
Yes, that was the main problem is that just the amount of hype based on what nothing. It just felt so weird even at the time that it's like, yeah, I mean it's cool that he's this high up and he's this young, but it doesn't feel like he earned the promotion anyways. But the Padres just did this on their own accord, and
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
why we're hyped.
yeah. If you go back and look at his stats, and just to dwell on him for a few minutes more, at the time we have, when they put him up in A ball in 2023. That was his like introduction to baseball. He got 220 plate appearances there. Okay. He hit 267, 350, 487. That was a slash line.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually not bad.
It was his lowest age to level too. So like the age difference from where he was at was probably the best for him. I mean, it's like 4 years is his level. So everywhere else has been overwhelmed.
Yeah, he had 9 home runs, 5 steals. He had a 10-point, basically an 11% walk rate and a 26% K rate.
Yeah,
and a 220 ISO.
Solid. I'd absolutely take that. Yeah.
I mean, so when you look at those numbers, you're like, oh, this is a guy to get excited about. And then they rushed him to A ball and double A in the same year. I mean,
unheard of.
And he shocking. He struggled. And so how much of this is confidence? How much of it is not? In 290 plate appearances in 2023. His slash line ended up being because of this rush to the higher levels. And then in 2024, he had a bad year. He had 469 plate appearances at, high A ball and, hit 206.
Yeah, not surprising at all.
So,
yeah.
So we'll see. I mean,
yeah, that's why I'm glad I brought it up because I needed some type of I have one share of him in the league, and because I bought in. I'm like, dude, he's pretty young. He's doing all right. We'll take a flyer on. Let's see what happens because the acquisition cost for me was not very high, thankfully.
Yeah.
So I lucked out there, but so disappointed. I'm like, man, I am not getting at all what I thought I was going to be getting. I thought I got a good deal here based on where I got him at. So yeah.
Yeah. If you paid a little, you paid a reasonable price for Ethan Salas, I think it's just a guy you hold on to find out what happened. And then, it's not costing you that much with one roster spot.
Right. Exactly.
And if he shows any kind of life, he's somebody you can trade.
I have not cashed out yet, but I'm just like, I'm over it. I needed to hear something good. I got to hear some good news about Ethan Salas.
Yeah, what I would say is it's like lukewarm news, I guess.
Lukewarm news.
I don't know.
Well, then I'm still selling.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is if you sell, you're not going to get anything.
No, I'm just going to probably cut loose of the whole thing, pretty much. Just cash my chips in. But yeah,
and
absolutely.
Format you're in, right? I mean, if you're in ABL, you're not cutting Ethan Salas. I mean,
No. This is a totally different league, different format.
Yeah.
So, but luckily, 30-teamer, you better hold on to that guy for sure.
Right.
You better. Not even a question. You hold on to him.
Yeah, if you're in a 16-team league, and you have 20 minor league spots per team, roster.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to hold on to him.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Is that it's like there's so many other guys out there that are actually doing well right now that me kind of holding out on this guy for really no reason is tough. So okay, yeah, absolutely.
So those are my thoughts. Well, listen, Cal, it was super fun to have you on the show.
Yeah,
it was great. We definitely have to get you and Don on the show.
Would love that. Absolutely.
So we'll have a father-son show.
Definitely.
And that'll be good. And because Don hasn't been on the show either, so we gotta make this happen.
Yeah, we gotta get him on here.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll let you go back to your other podcasting job.
Okay.
And, you got to get ready for that. So I look forward to seeing you guys in action at the beginning of the week. But pleasure to have you on. Great, interesting stuff. Super fun. And, for all those watching, remember to ABP. Always
ABP. See you.